You're listening to Eric Rogel Talks with Warriors, Lovers, Kings, and Heroes, where you'll hear real stories of the journey to modern manhood, told by the men who lived them. Raw, real, and 100% unapologetic. And now, here is your host, Eric Rogel.
Hey, this is Eric Rogel, and thanks for joining us on Warriors, Lovers, Kings, and Heroes. This is where each week you'll hear real stories of the journey to modern manhood, told by the men who live them. And today, I have a guest who has experienced a deliberate journey to manhood. As a Westerner, he has participated in a native African tribal rite of passage, and he's going to tell you all about that in a minute. But talking to him and hearing the impact this rite of passage has on the young men and boys who participate in it really hammered home how we don't have anything like that here in the West. We don't have a definitive rite of passage or test or a benchmark to define our passage from boy to man. And this is part of the confusion for so many of us, for so many young men, really men of any age. What exactly makes me a man? Have I been tested? Can I prove myself? And how do I measure up against other men? This is what leads so many men, both young and old, to question their place in the hierarchy, to question their masculinity and their manhood. I know it's what made me question mine. It's what made me so angry when I was younger. So confused about when and how I actually became a man. Was it at 12 when my parents split and dad left and mom told me I was the man of the house now at fucking 12 years old? Was it when I lost my virginity at 16, or was it when I went off to college, got my first job, or got married for the first time? What is the test? What is the benchmark? What are the qualifications that make you a man? Are they the same for all of us? And should they be the same for all of us? And beyond when did I become a man is the question, how do I measure up to other men as a man? My guest and I discussed this today as well. You know, I see men who served in the military, who fought in wars, and think, shit, could I have done that? Now, I didn't serve in the military, and it's one of my biggest regrets. And while I'll be watching movies about wars, I'll think, could I have done that? Could I have come off a troop ship at Normandy with bullets flying by my head? Could I have fought in the Battle of the Bulge, or fought in Afghanistan or Iraq? And what about men who have achieved incredible success? Does being successful in your chosen field make you a man? My father thought so. His measure was purely scoreboard based, how much money you made. So the more money you made, the more of a man you were. And that's how it is here. We don't have a set criteria defining when a boy becomes a man or how to measure a man. But in other times, other eras, and other cultures, they had a concrete set of criteria that defined you as a man and your place in their society. They had tests and challenges that must be passed and completed before you could be considered a man in their society. And as I said, my guest today has experienced one of those rites of passage. His name is Gareth Roriston. Gareth grew up in England in a town called Blackwater near the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst. The area he grew up in had a lot of military families and a lot of military men. And so he was inspired by them, and he joined the British Army Reserves while he was still in college. After graduating college, he was a European mixed martial arts champion. He came to the U.S. to fight in the UFC. He was signed to be on the UFC's The Ultimate Fighter show, and then had his contract canceled before filming started. This led him to take a job teaching natural, functional fitness in Kenya, using things like tree climbing, rock tossing, barefoot running, to get back to the way men used to get fit. And while in Kenya, he took a position as the head of a wildlife conservancy, overseeing a massive wildlife preserve and fighting poachers. This is where he ultimately met the elder of the Watha tribe. This is the tribe of hunter-gatherers whose rite of passage he would end up participating in. So as you'll hear, Gareth really got back to living as a natural man when he went to Kenya, spending most of his time outdoors, spending a lot of time with the Watha tribe, learning their primitive but incredibly effective ways of hunting that they've used for generations. And he's made a documentary about the Watha called The Last Dance. That title will become clear as he talks about how they train their young hunters. So I was asking Gareth if he had always lived this way, always used nature to get fit. And we got into a conversation about how he began his training in combat sports, and how competing in combat sports is very much about challenging yourself and proving yourself against another man, and about the lessons and growth that this delivers, and how this can propel you on your journey to manhood.
There's something about combat sports where, I've done other sports before, but not only do you do that hard physical training that makes your body ache, you get beaten up as well. So you're dealing with bruises and headaches and concussions and all the rest of it. And then there's a huge amount of ego that comes with combat sports. I mean, the idea is you have to be very humble because you're constantly making mistakes, but it's a singular sport and it's man on man. And so you're always kind of measuring your value of a man in terms of your last performance, whether it was your last fight, whether it was your last bout of sparring, whether it was anything. It's something my coach Alexis kind of explained to me. He said, it is personal. I was going through a period of like, maybe my temperament wasn't there. It was like, it's personal. You get each other in the face. It is personal. You've got to take that fire to the ring, to the cage. That's a very important thing. And I think that's true. I think as a sort of a young combat athlete, trying to pretend it's like other sports, it can almost trip you up in a way. It is a fight. You don't play MMA. You play football. You play cricket. You play, tennis. You don't play boxing. You don't play MMA. You fight.
It's real. I mean, it is actually real. There's real combat, and there's real injury, and there's real winners and losers. So, of course, it's very strong that way. How was the mental aspect of that for you? Because it's a challenging mental sport as well.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, sort of being raised nicely by your parents and things like that.
And were you raised kind of? You say raised nicely. Tell me about that.
Probably to a lot of the audience in the US, it will sound very cliche and stereotypical, but I was just kind of raised to be an English gentleman, to be very gentle, to say please and thank you. These are very nice things to do. So, it's not like, I've got a story like Mike Tyson or something, where you come from the streets and this and that. I came from a nice home. I was just attracted to these sports.
Yeah, what attracted it to you? I mean, if you came up in that kind of, was it more of a, because I know like for me in my own life, I was raised very much the same way. I was raised to be very gentle, raised to be, a gentleman, softer. And then toward my teens, I got attracted to the martial arts as well because I was like, something's missing, right? There's some side of me as a man that really kind of wants to hit and be hit and get into combat and do all those kind of things. Was it the same for you?
Much the same. And I think I couldn't exactly say where it started or what the influence was, but I've always enjoyed the sciences as a subject at school. I trying to get into focus on anything, but I always really enjoyed biology. And I always, comprehended the theory of evolution. And I remember having this conversation even about 14 years old and explaining combat sports in much the same way I would now, and that it's a contained and controlled environment to express a natural instinct. And that's the height of civilization to me even now, to my understanding. It's not to deny what we are as a human being, because I think you rob us of our human spirit, human soul, whatever term you want to use. That if you make a socially acceptable time and a place for these things, then that's something I agree with. And people say, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do that? And I just like it, and I feel it's very much part of me, and I feel it's part of most people if you just let yourself have it. And it doesn't need to be some out of control, thuggish thing. There's a time and a place for everything. And I think the ring, the cage, the gym is a fantastic expression of that. Ultimately, I mean, really, if you really want to boil it down, I could probably word it more eloquently now than I could then. I ultimately think all sports are just a disguise for this. All sports, deep down in the human psychology, you want to know who's going to win and who's going to win at life, who's going to survive, and who can win in a fight.
Sure, and I think that, which it's constant competition. Yeah. Nature in and of itself is a constant competition for survival.
Totally. And I think we have that deep in our psychology, and we kind of, in civilized world, we meld that. So whether it's high jump, long jump sports, athletics, team sports, whatever, all you're just trying to see ultimately is just a measure of who would outcompete the next. And when you boil it down to the lowest denominator, who would kill who if they wanted to? That's ultimately what I think it comes down to. And so what attracted me to combat sports is just the honesty of that. I was always asked, oh, you like grappling and wrestling and stuff like that, you should play rugby. It's like, I like the tackling side of rugby, so I figured we'll just get rid of the ball and I'll just wrestle and do grappling.
Just get the tackling part.
Yeah, exactly. That's the fun part.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you said a minute ago, because it is so true when you said it's just part of our nature and it's part of who we are. And sports, athletics, especially combat sports, lets us as men really express that. And I think, I know for me, part of getting involved in it was knowing it was there and not wanting it to be wrong. And combat sports, regular sports, all of that allowed me to express it in a way that felt right, that felt natural, right? Without being told, hey, you can't do this. It's wrong for you to feel these things. It's wrong for you as a man to want to prove yourself against another man, right? Get into the ring and fight with someone else and see which one of you is the best. And it's not wrong. It's natural. It's part of nature.
Yeah. And do you know what? Win, lose, or draw, it's part of the human experience. It's something to experience as a man. And to not have that experience, to live and die and not have that experience, I think it was it Socrates that said one of the greatest tragedies in life, or something about fitness, said is for a man to never know the strength and the ability that he's capable of, to never express it.
Since Gareth was getting philosophical on me, bringing up Socrates and discussing the experiences of being a man, I told him a story about something a martial arts instructor of mine did when you first began to train with him. And we got into a discussion of the primal beauty and the benefits of getting punched in the face. I had an instructor early in my martial arts career who lined us up. We first started training, and it was right at the beginning of when MMA was starting to get big. And he lined us up, and we'd go ready to spar, and he'd punch you right in the face. And it was shocking. And you're like, hey, what are you doing? Because in a lot of these, martial arts classes, you never punch to the face. And he said, too many of you men have never been punched in the face. And if it ever happens, you get shocked. He goes, you should see the look on your face when I hit you. And he said, you can't be that way. And he said, let's just get this out of the way now. Punch you in the face. Too many of you have never been punched in the face in your life.
I bet he had a great time.
Oh, I'm sure it was fun as hell for him. It was like, and you got hit in the, and then you realize, you know what? I don't think I've ever really been hit in the face. And then it just gets less and less and less shocking. And you realize, for me, it was more of the more I do this, right? The more I, channel my beast, release it, be okay with it, and be okay with another man I'm in the ring with hitting me, the more I have this kind of, I'm okay with things that happen out in the quote unquote real world. Things aren't as shocking. Stuff that hits you is not as shocking. You're kind of prepared for that.
Yeah, you're really echoing a sentiment. A very good friend of mine, one of my old training partners, Sully Mahmood, said, I speak to some of these work colleagues and they get all nervous about having to, give a talk or a presentation, this kind of stuff. He's like, they come up and it bounces off me because every week I get crap kicked out of me by the top three beasts at welterweight in the country. And
nothing else really seems that pressure filled, right?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny. My first fight with a major sort of crowd back in the day, and I often did wear them anyway. Like the old school Vale Tudo trunks. Like basically the slightly long speedos. So I remember coming out, warming up, had this towel around me, and I came out into the ring because it was a ring that was before guys had started building cages. And this towel came off me. And I wasn't worried so much about the opponent and the fight at this point. It was just this incredible feeling of exposure. Having a whole crowd looking at me in just my pair of tight underpants. that was, like you said, I got so used to being hit and all that stuff. That stuff was easy. It was just the social component that was more worrying. that stage.
Right. How do I look in this ring and can they?
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. Christ, I'm pale in just these pair of underwears.
Yeah, it's amazing what our mind goes to, right? When we're, here's a guy that's across from you who's ready to tear your head off.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, I'm basically wearing Speedos in front of hundreds of people.
Yeah, exactly.
Gareth retired from MMA competition earlier than he planned, and it wasn't the anxiety of having to wear Speedos in front of hundreds of people that ended his MMA dreams. He came to the U.S., tried out for the UFC's The Ultimate Fighter show, and got accepted. Then a week before shooting was to start, his contract was canceled. Feeling he would never have control of his career in MMA, he answered an ad for a fitness instructor for a program in Kenya that was based on using natural movements to get fit.
I ended up with this company that had a very strong philosophy about using nature as a filter. Have you ever heard of a gentleman called Georges Herbert? He's a Frenchman from the turn of the century.
No.
So he's the guy that came up with the concept of their first military assault course, military obstacle course. So he traveled a lot. He's got a great famous quote in this kind of realm of natural fitness. And it is, their bodies were splendid, flexible, nimble, and enduring, and yet they had no other tutor in gymnastics but their lives in nature. And he was referring to African tribesmen that he'd seen on his travels. And it really inspired him. So he came up with sort of, I think it was 8 or 10 natural movement capacities. And through the research of the company, we decided to train people, including 12 natural movement capacities. And these were walking on all fours, running, jumping, balancing, climbing, throwing and catching, swimming, fighting. Essentially, we use all these natural human movement capacities in the course in some way.
I asked Gareth about the results they were seeing, bringing people back to being more fit by being more natural. And if he could give me an idea of specific things he was seeing in people, and he used the example of running barefoot, which is how we were originally designed to run, and how we've been deprogrammed, how the naturalness has been taken out of us.
In the Western world, as we grow up, your feet are basically the first point of contact with the world. So you have as many nerve endings in your feet as you do densely packed into your lips. So you actually get a lot of great sensory feedback from your feet as you develop as a child. Now, the first thing we do when we start walking is our mothers, in all their best intention for us, they put shoes on us. And so you tend not to get that sensory feedback back, and it truly affects your natural movement patterns. And it'll alter especially the way in which you run. And running, if you look at research from people like Harvard professor Dan Lieberman, there's a Russian guy called Professor Romanov who trains a lot of Olympians and things like that over in the West now. The natural kinematics have been altered by not getting that sensory feedback. So what you have happens now is you get a lot of people running on their heels as opposed to the ball of their foot, this kind of stuff. And essentially using more muscle action than the natural forces of elasticity, momentum, and gravity get them working for you. So in barefoot running, you don't necessarily have to be unshod, as in have no shoes on to learn the technique, though it helps at first. If it's such a natural movement capacity, couldn't you just take your shoes off and people will do it naturally? And the answer is no. You get into these patterns. It's like, as a martial artist, you will understand. If someone tries to teach themselves on the punch bag, they come to you, and it's almost harder to deprogram them than it is if you'd started with an athlete from scratch.
They have bad habits, right? You've got to undo bad habits before you can instill good habits.
Exactly.
I'm really feeling when you're talking about this natural movement is, that saying we have here in the States, which is country strong.
Yeah.
And you have these guys that have worked in the country, worked on farms, lifting stuff, moving things, working on machinery, not sitting around, cowboys, farmers, that kind of stuff. Incredible strength. They don't have the, they're not built, like you said, like bodybuilders.
Yeah.
They don't have that musculature, but the strength and the endurance are amazing.
This is something I've noticed and something I sort of want to do for my son as well. It's like, I think in this day and age, depending on how you grow up, I think tool use is so important. One thing I noted through martial arts and grappling especially, is sometimes I'd have this really powerful engine that I could drive with. You know, my glutes were strong, my hips were strong, like good, you know, core strength, great pillar and everything like that. But sometimes as I'm, you know, pushing on an arm or catching a choke, I'm mangling up my own hands. And the point of delivery is actually sort of my hands and my wrists. So if you give me a barbell and these nice smooth surfaces, and I get my hips underneath it, I felt like I'd lift your house. But it's useless when I'm taken slightly out of position. And I remember really thinking this. I was living at the gym and I was helping out these couple of workmen. And one of them was like messing around. There was only like 2 plates on the side of the barbell. And he tries picking it up and he tries power playing. He goes, look, I'm strong. And he's like struggling. There I am thinking that's the easiest thing in the world. And then I see him pick up like 6 layers of, I guess what you guys call sheetrock, we just call it plasterboard, pinch grip, and just walks off with it. Just pinching it in his hand. And there was absolutely no way I could do this. Absolutely no way. So he's pinch gripping this, he's balancing a fridge over here, and he walks off with it. And I just remember thinking, man, my hands and wrists are just so limp for the modern living. And I notice it with these hunter-gatherers as well, like out in the bush, like their hands and fingers, though they might not, you know, be as strong as a trained athlete in the way we would measure it.
Certain movements, right? Deadlift, bench press, those kind of things. We use as our benchmark for strength, right?
Yeah, how much can you dead and all that stuff. But like, what can you deliver? Because this is the point of contact. Like, what's your contact strength? If you've got no contact strength, then a lot of it is just so wasted. And I remember thinking that, like, it was after I'd done that, you know, a little bit of work with these guys. And again, I was in guard, and I was trying to set up this kimura and push it up somebody's back, and they were resisting. And I'm yanking on here, and my wrist is getting kinked back and kinked back and kinked back. And they're thinking I'm so much stronger than I'm able to actually deliver through my hand right now. And it really got me thinking. So yeah, there's that natural strength that's just so practical. And like you said, there's workman, country strong, and that kind of stuff. It's like, I'd rather have half the engine and be able to deliver all of it.
Yeah, you know, when you were talking about the hands too, for men, I mean, you know, well, you know, humans in general, but I'm thinking specifically about men. The hands is our main tool. We use it for everything, but we become so civilized that we're using it for typing and, you know, other things, whereas before we used to use it to you know, forge tools and hold tools and fight and, you know, in hunting and farming and all those other kind of things. And so that main tool of ours has become weaker and weaker.
Oh, totally. Even just general things, even after the hunt, you know, if you're stripping the carcass and you're skinning things, you're getting your thumbs in there, this kind of stuff. And I've noticed when I'm more active, especially when I'm out in the field, even little things like my nail beds get stronger. You know, you go to peel something, you know, now that I'm a bit suburbanized, you know, like I feel it. Like if I was to try and get my nail in something, peel it, I almost feel like I'm going to peel my own nail off rather than, you know, they harden up and thicken up. Everything gets
makes me think about claws, right? In an animal, claws. And we actually have them too, from what you're saying.
Yeah.
You got in nature, it strengthens it to the point where you can actually use your nails almost like claws. And then civilized, we get back to the point where it weakens.
It's true. And so much of this stuff, we tend to think, we've evolved out of. We haven't. We just don't get the stimuli. You know, it's even this great book, The Story of the Human Body by Dan Lieberman, Harvard professor. And he was saying the average hunter-gatherer, contemporary, their head is about 5% bigger than the average urban. And one of the reasons why, I was talking about wisdom teeth, there's an idea that our jaws and our palate has just got smaller and we've evolved that way. It's actually an erroneous idea. What happens is we eat such soft food that a palate doesn't expand to where it should do. So if you were to eat, you know, hard, tough, fibrous foods and, you know, even using your teeth making leather and this kind of stuff and using your mouth as a tool, as a lot of hunter-gatherers do, there's plenty of space for your wisdom teeth to come in because your palate actually expands to that degree. So there's a concept, you know, this is one of the things, maybe your hands get smaller and weaker and your jaw gets smaller. Actually, it's all a matter of stimuli. It's your body is expecting a life in nature that you just don't receive and you just don't get.
What fascinates me about this is how we can still get our bodies back to that state of primal or natural by giving it that natural stimuli, by getting back to nature and using our bodies as nature intended. So Gareth spent time bringing people back to nature, getting them back to their natural fit selves, but an opportunity opened up for a different job, one he was uniquely suited for, and one that ignited a passion in him.
Basically, there was a wildlife conservancy about 2 hours away from where I was. I ended up with a girlfriend in Kenya, and her father was the chairman of the board for the conservancy. And I'd always had this interest in wildlife, and I asked if I could just go and shadow the warden, if that was okay. And so, I shadowed the warden a few times and for a while, and one time when I was out there, he had to leave on compassionate leave. His father got very sick. And whilst his father was ill, they said, well, Gareth's been up there enough now. Do you want to cover? So sure, I covered. And then a short time later, he resigned. And then, basically covered up there for a long time, sort of went back and forth and ended up seasonally working at the coast with the fitness retreats, and then going back to the bush, and then back to the fitness retreats, and back to the bush. And then from that, everything grew. I even ended up working for a bamboo trading company up country. But, I really cut my teeth at the Glana Wildlife Conservancy, where we had 65,000 acres. Very unique place in that it's wedged between a national park called Tsavo East. There's a fenceless boundary between the two. So Tsavo East and Tsavo West combined is something like the size of Israel. So you've got this huge wilderness, 65,000 acres next to it, in between the national park and then to the east of the 65,000 acres, you have 1.6 million acres of government ranch land, which is essentially, it's not manicured ranch land. It's not like they're sowing seeds and setting up pasture. They're just letting cattle graze through it. So there's wildlife abounding everywhere. So it's a very unique place. One of my favorite places to this day, one of the things I love about Tsavo is you can get a lot of wilderness areas and wildlife parks and things like that, but they're fenced. They have to be very managed. It's got the size that you get this true sense of wilderness, and all the wildlife essentially just migrates and wanders through on its ancestral migration patterns. It's not like they get stuck because there's no fences. And you set up water holes and that's where they'll be, and you've got to really manage the land. You can almost kind of leave it to its own devices. So for me, it was brilliant. It had this great feeling of being a frontiersman, and you're on this 65,000 acre place, and often there's only two of you looking after it, me and a game scout underneath.
It's a massive amount of area to cover.
It's a huge area to cover, and we would patrol in the Land Rover and find evidence of either poaching, or the biggest thing was illegal cattle grazing.
So Gareth's new job is to protect the wildlife, especially elephants, from poachers. And from what he tells me, the herdsmen letting their cattle graze illegally on the land were particularly dangerous because they were often lookouts, scouting opportunities for poachers. It was while investigating poaching that Gareth came in contact with the Watha, a tribe of legendary elephant hunters whose centuries-long traditions were being endangered and made illegal by Kenya's hunting laws. But rather than rush to arrest Watha tribesmen forced to poach elephants to survive, he sat down with one of the tribe's elders, both out of respect and in an effort to understand why they still hunted in spite of the laws.
I needed a lot of understanding of local communities for community outreach and things like that. So I knew basically who the few basic ethnic groups were. And I'm not sure what came first, the chicken or the egg. I think probably people explained to me that there was one community that was a hunter-gatherer community. So I knew that the Ordamas, the Waride, and these other guys, Somalis, they were herdsmen. And I knew the Giriyama, they were agrarian peoples, they were farmers. The Kamba, they were much further up north, were traditionally hunters. But somewhere through the grapevine, like the hunters of all hunters, the best of the best were the Watha. And that was all I knew, that they were just these incredible bushmen, amazing bush craftsmen. I would keep intelligence folders on poached elephant. Sometimes they'd be shot, and sometimes they'd be shot with a poison arrow. When they'd be shot with a poison arrow, when I did the rounds and asked the game scouts and asked anybody who was local communities, any of the herdsmen that worked for the government, it would always come back to either the Walengulu, which is another name that the Watha go by. So one day in a sort of, a joint forces community outreach kind of program between the Kenya Wildlife Service, the GSU, our landlords, the government ranchers, and myself, we all traveled down in my Land Rover to the heart of the Watha village. And it was there that I met an elder by the name of Abadiba. And I started to learn more and more about this community and this culture. And the boss of the local government branch back then, he was a bit of a tyrant. And he sort of liked to show off a bit. He came in and he was giving everybody a real tongue lashing. Very harsh with all these people. And there was this one little old man that was Abadiba. And he's got his kind of kikoi skirt on. He's completely shirtless. He really looks the part. He's blind in one eye's all white, completely withered, but sort of weathered. There's like a lifetime of just life out in the wild there. And he was not disrespectful, but he was kind of proud. He was short, and he had this kind of, what we've just been talking about, kind of the great posture that natural living people do. And, he was just like, he was clearly old, but there was this picture of vitality. He would say, listen, and he was sort of quiet, and he'd ask some questions, say, why are you coming here? Why are men in the village? And he would talk on. And I really liked this guy, and I really wanted to hear his stories and what he had to say about the community. So I thought, I'm going to take the opposite tack here. As soon as the telling off, as it was over, I asked him if he'd just come down and sit in a patch of grass. I had a backpack. There's a big tradition, especially in Africa, like elders are treated very, very well. If you're a baby or if you're an old person, you're really treated well. In the middle, look after yourself. So I come along, I put my backpack on the ground just to give him somewhere to sit. I sit on the floor, and I just want to ask him a few questions. And his son is there translating for me. His son's a guy called Guyo, who's now a really close friend of mine. And he tells me about his whole life and about the community, about how when he grew up, they were still in this semi-hunter-gatherer existence. Yes, the national park had been formed, but they could still hunt and eat elephant and this kind of stuff. He tells me about how he used to work for professional hunting outfitters. In fact, he was considered absolutely, invaluable. That they took him to India, they'd taken him to Sudan, to Tanzania. He'd traveled all around the world. And then he was still able, in his word, to utilize their skills to come into the modern world and say, okay, we can still hunt. And we basically train all these Mzungu, these white guys, how to hunt and to understand elephant behavior. And he just went through the whole gamut. Yeah, I got arrested for poaching at this time. I've poached so many elephants. I've hunted with these guys, I've hunted with that. And even that ADC, that government ranch boss, who was kind of a bit aloof at this point, was just listening because his stories were just so fantastic. How he lost his eye, being chased by the government in a car accident after poaching. How he, the methods he used, arrow placement, understanding elephant behavior. It was fascinating. His sons, his favorite son, his best son, all his stories. And at that point, I was just hooked. I just realized this culture is so important. It's nothing like what I thought it was. The analogy I always use is kind of Native American Plains Indians. I know it's, from what I've read, it's not necessarily always a accurate view of how it was, but that kind of romanticized view we have them in their relationship with the bison, and how it's their totem animal. They dance about it, they sing about it, they follow it, they wait for it to come back, they eat it. It's our cousin, our brother. This is how the Watha think of the elephant. So they're from this old man, there's great reverence for the creature, there's great kinship, there's a great understanding that we are animals, they are animals. And at that point, I was hooked, and I just wanted to know more. So I reached into my own pocket, and I hired him and his son Benson come to the conservancy, be game scouts. The conservancy couldn't afford to do it. I paid them out of my own pocket. For me, they were just my private, in my mind, they're my private tracking instructors. I'm going to learn from the indigenous peoples everything about elephant behavior, about the local bushcraft, everything I need to know, about performing, and just for my own fascination, being a part of this environment. And that's where it really...
Yeah, you know what I'm feeling around that, what you're saying, that is a couple things. I mean, a few things. One being that if anyone had just taken the time to sit and listen to this man and have him tell his story, there's a whole different perspective on who they are and what they're doing. Right? They're not just poaching elephants. They have a reverence for the animal, and it's part of their culture and who they are. And now they've been told, you can't do this. But listening to him tell the story of it just gives you a whole deeper view of who he is, who they are, and what they're, what makes them do what they do.
It does. And just to kind of bring it back down to earth, because it's very easy to sort of over-romanticize things. There was a point by necessity where they had to convert to commercial poaching, where they would have to kill more than what they would normally eat. They couldn't. It's a crime scene now. And essentially at one stage during the 60s and 70s, the whole community was complicit in the illegal ivory trade. What's interesting, when you hear it from that guy, he says, yes, I partook, I had to. In his view, in his communities, because elephants, they understand how intelligent elephants are. Modern research shows us that elephants are quite unique in that, like human beings, they have a sort of emotional intelligence as well. The Watha, they know that intuitively. They know what an intelligent and emotionally intelligent animal it is. And he actually says you have to harden your heart, even traditionally, to kill an elephant. You have to be able to do that.
I know the audio got a little rough there, but what Gareth is saying is that the Watha had immense respect for their totem animal, the elephant. They know it is an intelligent animal and an emotional animal. And the Watha hunters had to harden their hearts to hunt it and kill it. It's all part of the training Watha boys receive, but not all of them become hunters. Many get their education in schools. And Gareth told me a really interesting story about twin brothers who each received a very different education, one formal and one natural, and each very valuable.
So there's two twins who got a really nice story. Both were very bright at school. One was more into school than the other. And their mother was attacked by a crocodile. She had her arm crippled. Crocodile attacks are probably like the biggest threat to the people in this community. So they need water every day. They're amazing at hunting elephant, hunting every animal on land, but they get dungered by crocodiles all the time. And so, his mother was essentially crippled for a little while. She has regained the use of the arm when they were young. So one of the twins had to stay behind while the other one stayed at school. So they made this pact, you stay behind, you stay at school, get an education. I'll help Mum. He started growing tomatoes and support you and pay for your schooling and send food to you. And, when you get an education, you're going to help and look after me. You're going to have a better job. Oh, yeah. So at 12 years old, they made this pact. So it's a really nice story. Within a few months, just by growing tomatoes, he'd made enough money to buy a bicycle. Benson came up, delivered supplies for Guyo by bicycle at school. And Guyo's side of the story was, I realized what a different education my brother was getting because he was spending more time with my father, who was that elder I mentioned, when we were cycling back one day and there was a herd of elephant coming in, and it was dark because it was early in the morning when we were leaving. And we were in a really dangerous situation because it's what you call a breeding herd. So the mothers around their young are very dangerous. People talk about elephant in must. In my experience, it's normally elephant cows with calves. So this elephant pipes up, and they're stuck in the middle of the dirt track road. And Guyo's instinct is to duck for cover and run. And Benson grabs him. And he says, "No, stay still. We have to hold our ground." stay still, stay looking at the elephant. We have to hold our ground. We can't if you run, shoot, chase. And he was very confident. And, Guyo's, I'm shaking. But, Benson at this stage, following his father, learning how to hunt illegally, or, gathering around the bush and coming across all these things, had learned all these lessons. And in Guyo's mind, it was after that experience, that's when I realized there was the difference. Guyo is obviously still excellent in the bush, but compared to his brother Benson, who then went on to become a game ranger, there's no comparison. Benson truly is elite.
I love that story because there's so much in it. There's the duty to take care of their mother, the commitment to each other to do whatever it takes for the family to survive, and the value of gaining wisdom and experience from the elders, wisdom and experience that saved their lives that day. I asked Gareth about the training young boys get in how to hunt, how to stalk and kill an elephant. And it is a masterclass in not only how to mentor, but how to keep traditions alive, passing them down from elders through experience, not through writings or stories, or like in our society through video games and social media, but by actually engaging and experiencing. Gareth explains how the training starts.
Basically, there's what they call a season for it. I can't remember the name in Watha. And often between these groups, everybody, they're the same ethnic community, and they essentially live in extended family groups of clans. So they go and visit, their brothers and cousins and this kind of stuff. And they say it's time to, we've got a crop of young men. It's about time that they get trained. So they basically decide who the trainers are going to be. And I guess they kind of have, the equivalent of like a big scout camp, where they send them over. And the way in which they teach them initially before they go out onto the hunt. So there's two types of hunts. There's a short hunt and there's the long hunt. The long hunt will be like multiple days going out for big game, and the short hunt will just be like a warthog or something like that. So that's close to where they're camped. But the main way that they train them before they take them out on the short hunt is they basically play hunting with them. And it's brilliant to watch because they go through all the motions of hunting, down to the high fives when you make a good shot and everything. Yeah.
Does somebody pretend to be an elephant? I mean, do they have like some of the... Or
they don't do that. It's just all visualized. It's all visualized. So at this point, and they do teach them like real tracking of real spoor and things like that. But that actual sort of final kill shots and things like that, it's all kind of visualized. So they'll come out, they'll talk in the way they talk. And when I talk to some of these elders, I'm like, what are you doing? Are you reading the ground? Are you picturing it as if it was over there? He said, a little bit, but mostly they're just recalling old hunts that they'd either had together with the other guy or ones that he'd done, and they remembered that the wind was blowing in from this direction. And
they remember everything about their hunts.
Every aspect. Sometimes in certain clans and certain families, when they come back, they will always celebrate a hunt with a specific dance. Sometimes that dance will represent elements of that specific hunt. So through that dance, other members of the community could go and tell anybody else exactly how that successful hunter's hunt went, just by watching the dance. So
their way of telling the story is through this game.
Yes, and it's also a very important way of training young men. In fact, it's one of the rites of passage. If you can't perform the elephant dance, then you can't go out on the long hunt. So one of the ways I've even been trained, and they kind of keep it up and they reinforce their knowledge of the elephant. Even every time I go back, the first greeting is we do the dance.
No kidding. So that's very, very, very important.
It's very, very important. Very important. And you demonstrate different aspects of elephant behavior during the dance, particularly mock charges and things like that. So when you've got someone that's really good at it, if you understand elephant behavior, you can look at it and go, oh my goodness, yeah, that is exactly what they do. So it's everything from mock charges and kicking dust to the way you flip your head around and this kind of stuff. They flap their ears. There's a particular rhythm of breathing that you do. So when you first start the dance, you almost look like a soldier. marching on the spot, keeping time. And there's this deep, shallow chest breathing. And that gets the rhythm going. And then the ladies will all start clapping their hands. And this represents a calm elephant just flapping its ears, keeping cool. And then the man will come in and the trunk will start swinging. And then sometimes as you do these sort of mock charges, so, everybody, then you'll charge, and the arms come out like a displaying elephant's ears. And, it goes through a whole rhythm, and you mock charge 2 or 3 times until you finish. And then there's a certain cry when you finish. And it varies from village to village, but it's normally 2. So you do the final charge and they'll go, ho, ho, and that'll be the end of it. And they'll, ba-dum, dum, on the drums. And that's your turn finish.
Do they do this not only as a greeting or as a test, but they do this to get themselves kind of worked up before the hunt as well?
They'll do it after the hunt. It's always done after the hunt. Yeah. But and every sort of, if there's get together, like a community get together, this will be one of the dances.
When you mentioned before, when they were training the younger men how to hunt, and they were using the memories of actual hunts, they knew every detail, they put it into dance. What it really tells me is, when they're out there on the hunt, they are extremely present in that moment, and they are paying full attention to what they are doing.
Absolutely correct. That's exactly what's happening. And it's amazing when they get into this zone, when they're just showing the guys, they're showing the kids. It's almost like they're going into their own world, but all the elements are there, like they know exactly what to test for. I mean, it truly is when you're around these people, because even the other hunting communities like the Kamba, they always pay respect to the Watha. The Watha are the best at what they do. So it's like going to I don't know whether to put it in terms of athletes or education. It's somewhere in the middle, but it's like they are the college that produces the most amount of NFL players, their community is
program for learning this specific sport.
Exactly, yeah. So, all their guys, they are the Michael Jordans of their world. They are the Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, and Harvard of elephant behavior and hunting.
In the Watha tribe, the best of the best are involved in training the young men how to hunt, how to be successful, passing their wealth of knowledge and experience down, a tradition that has allowed them to endure for generations. Gareth himself has gone through this rite of passage with the Watha. He learned how to hunt with them, and I asked him how the rite is structured and if there is a final test to achieve manhood.
Ultimately, there's 3 major chapters. Number 1, you have to learn the dance. That is key. So before you can go out on the lagata, the long hunt, you must learn the dance. That's almost like they can trust you. Okay, you've done your theory test. You understand elephant behavior and what you should do. You've been through the course, however long they want it to last, the season of training and playing hunting. You've demonstrated that you understand wind and you can read the signals and the signs. You've walked around with the elders just a little bit around, and you've seen animal behavior, and you've demonstrated that you can predict it, and you've got a relative grasp of tracking ability. That's just to be allowed to go out on the hunt. So if you go out on the hunt, you're an apprentice, you won't wait the kill shot, but you're on your way to becoming a man now. That's the first kind of rite of passage, is learning the dance and joining an elder on a hunt. Before you can be married, you have to demonstrate that you can make fire from friction.
Wait, making fire from friction is a requirement of marriage?
Yes, it's a requirement of marriage. Because fire is the source of life. It's what makes us human. So if you can't make your wife a fire, then you're done.
And you can't have a wife.
Exactly, and often there is some degree of prearranged marriage and things like that, but they're pretty much free to choose who they'd like to get married. So quite a common sort of gesture, if a man's attracted to a lady, is wherever she lives, like her home and her hut, is whether it's she lives with her parents or whatever, a young man will go outside and make a fire outside the hut, and that's a kind of declaration of his interest, And it also shows the parents that he's capable. He can make a fire in the home.
That is fascinating to me. I'm trying to even relate that to anything in other cultures and other civil, and I can't think of anything that's kind of like. It's almost like, proving this. You have a job and you can earn a living, and that to me would be the closest. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Have to make fire. Okay, so that's
exactly, yeah. So you're self-reliant, you're confident. Mom and dad don't have to do it for you, and then at that point you can get married. The final point, you have to demonstrate you can track and use a bow. Using a bow is important. So archery is a very important thing. To my knowledge, I don't know that there are any actual, sort of tests. It's not like you've got to shoot an apple off someone's head or anything like that. But it's just a generally accepted that he's competent. He can use a bow. You don't necessarily have to be able to make one. They have different specialists. Mostly older men that are too old.
They have craftsmen that'll do that for you.
They have craftsmen. They have bowyers and blacksmiths and that kind of stuff. So it might be one guy who's just really good at extracting iron ore from rocks and can make arrowheads and that kind of thing. So they do have sort of specialist roles within that society.
Not every kind of formal ceremony at the end of this when you to show that you've become a man in their culture.
It would be the point where you kill what would be considered by Africans of European ancestry as one of the big five animals. So they recognize the big five the same way, Europeans do, as in, lion, leopard, rhino, buffalo, elephant. These are considered the most dangerous species to hunt. Once you've killed one of those, then you're officially Mangudo. You're a man now. And you're an elder. And so you have that, that right to kind of walk around.
Is there a time frame for that? Like you have to do it before a certain age, or just
there isn't.
Whenever you happen to do that?
Yeah, there isn't. It's just whenever you happen to do it, you become Mangudo. And then once you become Mangudo, there's a different, they're pretty informal, pretty egalitarian people, like most hunter-gatherers are. But, there is a different level of respect afforded to you. It's an honor. It's a feather in the cap. And then from there, you can progress in a certain sense where they have a title. And it's, I guess, what would be the closest thing? I guess it's like saying Eric BSc Honours or something, or something, or even maybe being knighted or something like that. Or an ace. This is actually a better one. This is a better one. So during the First World War, if you made 11 kills in your aeroplane flying corps, you were considered an ace. So if you demonstrate a particular ability to kill any particular animal, like you're just a great hunter of elephant, you're a great hunter of buffalo, you're a great hunter of this or that, you get called Mead. And Mead is the title. So you could be a Mead Watha, which would be an ace rhino hunter. Mead Arba, which means ace elephant hunter. So after becoming a man, you can, kind of elevate your social status in this sense. And I think ace is probably the best analogy.
When you see these guys, when they go from boy to man, or get, not respected, I would say get recognized as a man and then recognized as an ace, do they carry themselves differently? Is there like a different feel?
Definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Definitely, yeah, there is. There's a definite sense of deference and respect, and there's a sense that people should listen to you, and they do. Other members of the community really do. And that, honestly, I would never find that arrogant. I almost think it's quite worthy. It's, thinking back to anything like going into, even, let's think of something more informal than the military. Let's say in a martial arts gym. The guy that's had the most experience, that's had the most fights, who's been around the world, who's, been coaching the longest and stuff like that, you just tend to listen to them. Or the guy that just happens to have found his little groove and is really good at one particular technique, or just has a great strategy, or knows how to condition himself the best. There's no formal structure there. It's just, he just knows. You listen to the guy. He always gets his weight right. And so,
I think part of that too is they've earned that.
Yes.
I think that's an important thing in the Watha tribe, and then also, like you're saying, in the gyms and in any kind of sport business. When you earn that, and you've put the time in and the effort in and earned it, it's a much different level of respect than if you were just handed it. Because look, I mean, I would feel in the Watha tribe, if they just handed somebody that title and say, here, take your bow, go hunt some elephant, they wouldn't last very long out there.
No. No.
Right? So you must earn that respect.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's been fun, even to do the un-British thing and blow my own trumpet. It's been quite fun to see myself progress and the level of respect I start to get as I started to learn to track, and I started to learn these things. And when I could make fire by friction,
which is why you got married. That's how you were able to get married.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay, go get married now. but it has been fun. Like I've noticed that even in recent years, sort of going back and really having time to just spend time with them, thanks to basically the trying to make this documentary. And my wife's been so supportive, and and having the time to go out there. Even in that time, I've noticed each time I go back, there's an extra sort of level of respect. And even from some of because they are starting to homogenize into greater Kenyan society, some of the younger guys, or even age contemporaries of myself, don't know what I know, because I made an effort and wanted to learn from the elders.
And this is interesting because you're, let's just say you're an outsider, right? You weren't born into the tribe. You were not related. So so they're willing to accept you into their society, even as an outsider?
That's one of the great things of what is documented about these guys. There's only really a couple of books that mention them in more than superficial detail. But that is something that's always repeated, is that they have this fantastic way to sort of blend and mold, and they are very accommodating, and yet they totally retain their culture.
The Watha are able to bring outsiders into their tribe and still retain their culture. That's a powerful example of how keeping to traditions and having strong elders who guide younger men the right way to observe and continue those traditions, how this can create a lasting culture. Having experienced it firsthand in Kenya, after not experiencing it at all growing up in England, I asked Gareth if he felt there was a need for rites of passage now in our modern Western society.
Yes, but I don't know what it is. I think I quite like the informal way they do it. I think there are certain things. I mean, this is so ingrained in their culture that it's just a given. So I mean, I wouldn't want to postulate on a criteria. I don't think I have the life experience to sort of do that yet at 39 years old. But yes, I do. I think there are certain things that are important for a man in the world to understand and be able to do, and to basically be respected by others that he can do. There's a degree of formality in that, where we all know where we stand with each other, especially when meeting strangers. Sure. Not only where we stand with each other, but where we stand with ourselves. True. Probably most importantly. Yeah, most importantly. There's a great sense of, no one can take that away from you. If you've been to a certain... there. I did this. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then I think the only place where that backfires is when you end up in a world where that is not respected. I think we are dangerously close to that world right now. So I asked Gareth, who has a 4-month-old son, how he plans on raising him, out in the wild or as a civilized man. I wanted to know how much influence his time with the Watha had on him as a father. For me, it's very, very, very important for him to spend time out there with me. So I've been married for probably 2 years in February. We have the safari company, and my intention is to divide the year between here in the States and over in Kenya. I have a sort of 4-month season, really, which is great for tourism. Starts to get a bit hot, and the weather breaks for during the rains. Not a lot of people want to go. I enjoy it. I enjoy seeing the land at that time, and actually just being a student of conservation and land management. Experiencing every part of it. Yeah, but I think for me, I'd love to have my son be exposed to not just the first world, but even, whether it, I mean, obviously it's going to be Manhattan, it's going to be New York City, because this is where my wife cut her teeth. But I think it's important to see a big metropolis, whether it's New York, whether it's London, whether it's there, to be able to flow and move in it, to understand that we have created an economy, we have created a way of living that is a pure abstraction and yet works. And then it's very important for me to see, for him to see, and African wilderness for me is very important in that it is where every human being first came into existence. So your physiology, yes, we've got, Europeans and stuff like that have less, melanin in the skin because of the ice age and this and that, but all the basic functions, everything that has developed in you is you are this African savanna species, from the reasons why you might be afraid of the dark to what excites you, what makes you happy, your urge to chase things when you see them move. Anything you want to understand about what it is to be a human being, I think it's the most important place in the world. I think African, especially East African wilderness, is so important for me to expose him to that and to have mentors like the Watha and other people, and then to understand that in this day and age, we are never changing. We're never going to go back to being tribesmen or whatever. But what we can understand is the animal that we are, how to incorporate those aspects of our lifestyle into our modern system, and how to keep this natural world alive through economy. Because everybody has one logic that they all believe in. Whether you want to, sometimes they call it money is the global religion. But whether you want to call it religion or the philosophy, one philosophy we all believe in, the whole world now, everybody works on money. So you come to the center of finance and capitalism, New York, London, Singapore, I don't care where it is. It's great to be exposed to that. Then you see the natural world. But with the growing population, that natural world has to make sense within the culture that we have created, the global culture of mankind. So it has to be paid for, and it has to serve a purpose and pay for itself if it's going to exist.
So for your son, you want him exposed to both sides of it, his civilized man and his natural man. Exactly.
And where the crossover is in between. So for me, yes, I would like to expose him to the bush and to the high end of finance, and understand that it has to pay for itself if you want us to keep living like this.
And that's the best way to raise a man today, I believe, fully embracing and acknowledging both his civilized man and his natural man, his beast, and understanding the advantages and uses for both. Before our interview, I sent Gareth a copy of our Sacred 7 core values. And again, they are courage, honesty, integrity, commitment, duty, honor, and love. And I asked him if he sees the same kind of adherence to core values in tribes like the Watha. And he gave me their unique definition of courage. We have we call it the Sacred 7 core values.
Yes.
That we do, which was courage, honesty, integrity, commitment, duty, honor, and love.
Excellent.
So in looking at those, what of those, do you see these same kind of core values in tribes like the Watha as well as with, civilized men?
Definitely. I feel, yeah, I do. I feel more so in many ways. I feel it is different though. When you have one cultural perspective, assuming another person has that same cultural perspective towards different actions is a recipe for misinterpretation. My definition of courage as, a Western educated, democratic, person might be a completely different definition of courage for somebody else. So I think they definitely have those core values, but the point is understanding from their perspective. If you were Japanese in the Second World War and you were captured, suicide was the courageous way out. If you're British and you're captured by the Japanese in Burma, suicide is the coward's way out. It's every officer's duty to doing what he needs to do and attempt to escape and live and win the war and give the intelligence back. Courage is both respected in both cultures, but it's manifested in a completely different way.
How do the Watha see courage? Is it being able to go out on the hunt? Like you said, when you talked about the twins, one standing his ground in the face of this angry mother elephant defending her calf. Is their, their sense of that, of courage, far different than ours?
I think their sense of courage is different than ours, and that wouldn't really be considered courageous.
That's just what you do in that situation.
It's just what you do. What is courageous to them, and not that I've had this conversation, but just by intuition, is maintaining the culture in face of all the pressure that's on you. That is the hardest thing they have to do. Often there are some Watha that will, when meeting people from other tribes that don't know their Watha, will claim to be from a different tribal community because they since they were disenfranchised, they're kind of looked down upon as these poor people, these dirt kickers that just live out in the bush. What do they know about anything? And I can definitely tell you, especially from my friend Guyo's perspective, from all the elders' perspective, courage is in being a Watha, is maintaining the traditions, is maintaining the language, is maintaining the dances, is being who they are. There are actually Watha communities scattered all around Kenya. And I was, I guess, privileged enough in the area I was. It's kind of, when I speak to them, and I've got no reason not to believe it, my friend Guyo has actually traveled to these different communities and researching his own culture. He says, here is where we really have the undiluted language. We still have people living the lifestyle. We have our folk tales, our dances. So yeah, if I was to answer for them, I think courage for the Watha community is in being a Watha, is in maintaining, honoring your ancestors, honoring your traditions, honoring that legacy and pushing forwards and training the children in that manner as well.
And that would be in the face of everything else that's coming at you.
In the face of everything else. And I think it's been that way for many generations now. It is to basically honor your background is courage to them.
I asked Gareth who his heroes were, who inspired him. And without hesitation, he said Sir David Attenborough. And if you haven't seen the video he mentions here in a second, do a quick Google search on David Attenborough and cannibals. It is well worth it.
I think what makes Attenborough very unique is he came along at essentially the start of broadcast TV. And he had this interest in the natural world. He studied natural philosophy at university. He was an avid fossil breaker when he was a kid, and he worked in programming. And he basically just pushed it to the areas where he was interested. And quite literally, the legacy of that is every single, whether it's on Animal Planet or anything like that, the format for almost every single wildlife program since then is from him. And I think what he does, he still does the best out of anybody. When you watch sort of Planet Earth and Africa and all the recent things he's done. I mean, these guys are even pioneering videography techniques to learn more about wildlife and nature. Simply as a result of trying to broadcast this stuff, he's spearheaded research and interest in the natural world to the point where people are so interested in saving it. He's kind of the godfather of it all. He was one of the first people to go to Papua New Guinea and meet uncontacted peoples there. And it's, I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Courage there too, right? I mean, we talk about, that took an enormous amount of courage.
Enormous amount of courage. I don't know, have you ever seen that footage?
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's fantastic. So back in the day, they were uncontacted. You never really know who you're coming across. And from what we knew about New Guineans is that they could often be quite warlike. So Attenborough's at the bottom of this hill. There's a whole bunch of New Guinean tribesmen, literally sort of headdresses and everything, spears and bows and arrows in their hand. Who knows what you're going to expect? They come charging down the hill. He doesn't know what's going to happen. They're going to kill me. They're going to do what? What's going to happen? And as they come out charging, he thinks they're the only thing an English gentleman can do. Puts out his hand and says, "How do you do?" And the footage, you see these guys charging, and they don't know what to do. They come to a halt. Maybe they shake hands in their culture, maybe they don't, but they kind of look at it as, gingerly puts his hand out and shakes his hand. And of course, they don't speak a word of each other's language. And, from there on it goes on. So, yeah, I think, just pioneering things and having the courage to just get out there and do it and stick to your guns. And, this is what I'm interested in. This is the way I want to go. I mean, at one stage, he ran the BBC, the largest, broadcasting corporation on the planet, and decided, to hand it over because he liked making the programs, and that was his world and that was his mission. So yeah, I think that's very inspiring.
So now let's get into you. So what kind of legacy do you want to leave? I mean, you're doing a lot of this same kind of stuff. You're out there with these cultures. You're working on a documentary of your own. What is it you want to leave?
I would really like to see the legacy of my safari company help this community keep their traditional way of life. And as a result of more people doing that, or at least in some regards. So whether they'll ever end up hunting or anything again, who knows? That's for the Kenyan government to work out. But I would like to see them apply their ancestral knowledge, these what I think are just really core skills of a human being, to a profession that gives them a livelihood without them completely losing their culture. Will it or not be the same? Because if they can't hunt elephant, no, it will be modified. But it'll still be the center of their world, and their tracking and all their abilities will still be there. Yes, in something of a diluted form. But I think these cultures existing are just so important for all of us, because it's an inflection into ourselves. It is the environment that created us, and they are masters of it. They know everything about it. When I've been out there with them, and hearing the things they tell me about just their ancestral beliefs of how elephants communicate. Some of this is cutting edge science. The idea of infrasound, it was only realized, I think, in 1997 or something, and the complexity is only being realized now, how elephants communicate through infrasound. They absorb the sound waves through their feet, channel them up through their bones to their ears and stuff like that. And the Watha have said similar things. With no knowledge of this academic stuff. So you just think, what more can they teach you, not just about elephant behavior, but about being a human being? You could try to think of examples now, but, why do you sweat? Why do you, why do you have a propensity to certain diseases and not others? What do we learn about food, and all this kind of stuff?
Just these centuries and generations of knowledge.
Exactly.
Gleaned from actually living it and being it, that they can pass on. And
exactly.
Preserve that and bring that.
Exactly, yeah. A sort of mind, body, spirit, world connection, bring it all together, what it all means. I think, that's what I'd like the legacy to be, just to be able to share that, preserve it, and, disseminate that knowledge and just change, I guess, mankind's paradigm in terms of thinking and the way we're going. You don't need a pill to fix you. Your lifestyle can. You won't get there in the first place. Your lifestyle will be fulfilling, physically and mentally nutritious. It will be, all these things that it should be if you just understand the human animal that you are. And you have fantastic examples living on the planet in the environment we evolved. There's learn.
Be open to it, right? Just observe and learn. And finally, I asked Gareth the biggest life lesson he's learned so far.
You have to keep going. You have to keep going. No matter what happens, you have to keep going. I think one of the biggest disappointments for me leaving sport was I felt very talented. I felt I had a lot of integrity. I felt, I trained hard. And what I've realized is you have to have all those things to be a champion and be at the top of your game. But just because you have those things, it's not given to you. Hard work, talent, sacrifice, and integrity doesn't mean that you're definitely going to be a champion. You have to have them to be a champion, but it's not a guaranteed thing. So what are your options? You're either going to give up or keep going. Giving up is not an option, so just keep going. Just keep going. Keep going and learn to be, I guess, grateful and satisfied with what you have. I think is the biggest lesson is, not to assume that even if you do everything right, it's going to come to you. I think there's often I think a lot of people get disappointed in life as they get older. I think that's maybe where the midlife crisis comes from. That I did all this work, I put everything, I'm working my ass off. Where's my payoff? Do you know what? That's the nature of the universe.
I'm going to add to that along with that, because I'm looking at it from an additional perspective to what you just said, and that is a lot of times what your original goal was, what you do achieve and experience may not look like you thought it was going to look.
Yes,
yeah. So you trained to be an MMA champion. You had the drive, the skill, the sacrifice, all of it. But look where it led you to find passion and purpose on the other side of the world, out in the wilderness.
I think you're correct. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's a much more well thought out way of saying what I was trying to say. But yeah, I think nothing's guaranteed, but you will always learn. I think that's the biggest. And if you accept that it's not guaranteed, and you adjust and manage your expectations, then life will be equally as fulfilling and surprising. And
be open to where you end up, right? Open to any possibility.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's that openness to any possibility that ultimately leads us to greater success and fulfillment. I want to thank Gareth Roriston for joining us today, for telling us the story of his journey from civilized man in England to natural man, an inductee into the Watha tribe in Kenya, and how it is possible to live as both. Well, not only possible, but really essential. It's integral to who we are as modern men, to embrace both of those parts of ourselves. And now, after talking to Gareth about this, I wanted to get the men of the round table together to get their takeaways from what Gareth said. I'm going to air the full discussion, so make sure to listen to that one, but here are just a few clips from that talk. And joining me for this session are John, Doug, Alex, and Mark. And John leads us off.
I love when he said these guys, they come in, they're fighting, and then they go into a boardroom or do a presentation or get in front of lots of people. It's like, this is nothing. I just was, sparring to the death in this MMA ring, and here I am doing a presentation. This is nothing.
Here's Doug.
He seemed to have really enjoyed the fact that he grew up doing physical stuff, notwithstanding that he was supposed to be growing up as a gentleman and all that. And he could see that at least I could feel with him, that was real important that he tapped into that, because otherwise it sounds like who knows what he would have done if he got frustrated and didn't tap into something that was a healthy release for him.
Here's Alex on competition.
This is where you develop a good understanding of competition. I mean, we're all sports guys to some level. I have my sports, Doug has his sports. Everybody loves a certain sport. And in that, when you see guys have the biggest rivalry, after they retire or something like that, they become best friends. There's this immense respect amongst competition.
And Mark on the value of having differing viewpoints.
Everything is about your viewpoint. You understand? Because I see Facebook posts all the time where it's like people want to just post out killing elephants. It's like, you're terrible, all of this. It's like in America, we hate the killing of elephants. Sure, to go out and just kill an animal and leave it lay for the thrill of shooting it, even hunters would never agree with that. That's just craziness. But it's like when you get into like what their viewpoint was this is what we've done for our entire life. You see another viewpoint. And even if I'm right, it doesn't make you wrong.
I want to thank the men of the round table for their insights. I think for us, there's an agreement on the importance of competition and testing yourself, on facing challenges, even getting punched in the face, to toughen you for what you'll face in the world. Now I want to know what you got out of Gareth's story. Does it make you want to challenge and test yourself? Does it inspire you to connect more to your natural man? Let me know. You can find me on social media. The links are on our website, WLKHpodcast.com. Just click on them and leave a comment. And also, remember to subscribe and then rate us and leave a review and comment. It really helps us out. I would appreciate it. And then, as always, please make sure to share this show, this episode, with men you know will get value from it. That's what we're doing here. We want to make sure we're impacting and inspiring the lives of as many men as possible. So please pass it on. And I want to thank Gareth Roriston for joining us today, for being real and honest and telling us the story of his journey to modern manhood. And I want to thank you for listening to Eric Rogel Talks with Warriors, Lovers, Kings, and Heroes today. I'm Eric Rogel, and I'm honored to be with you, to be your brother on your hero's journey. I'll talk to you next week.